Aircraft of all types take to the air day in and day out. They include all segments of aviation and cover the breadth and width of the nation. Regardless of type, each aircraft has an aviator in command. During every flight operation, all aviators must use their eyes. The human eye, by definition and function, is one of the most complex systems in the world. To a vision specialist, it's simply the organ of vision. To poets and lovers, it's the mirror of the soul. To physicians, the mirror of disease in the body. To you and me, the eye is the basic means of identifying and relating to what is going on around us. It lets us focus on the main object of our interest and be aware of, though not identify, what's happening in the periphery. It is said that 95% of what our eyes perceive is from peripheral vision. Flicker or movement is what allows the eye-brain combination to notice and then focus on the action. At night, the central retina used in the day becomes a blind spot, and peripheral vision becomes our most effective sight tool. Compensate for this by looking 10 degrees away from the object and shifting the eyes from one off-center point to another. Sight gives us what no other sense can: color. We're extremely dependent on our eyes. It's been estimated that 80% of all information intake is through them, but we tend to take them for granted, and at times ignore and abuse them. The eye is vulnerable to just about everything: dust, fatigue, emotion, germs, age, and to some, the effect of last night's party. We also fail to compensate for their limitations, and often our eyes make fools of us. For example, the familiar 3D cube illusion. Then there's the old parallel line trick. Your infallible eyesight should tell you that line A and line B are parallel, but they appear to be quite curved. Now take a look. On a more scientific level, our eyes accept light rays from an arc of nearly 200 degrees, but they are limited to a relatively narrow area in which they can actually focus and classify an object. The eye is one of our most important instruments of flight, but we still take our eyes for granted and are often unaware of how their limitations relate to our flying. Of course, you couldn't even fly without eyes, for they provide the necessary input for performing a flight: attitude, speed, direction, and proximity to things like the ground. Vision is altered by atmospheric conditions, glare, heat, windshield, lighting, aircraft design, too little oxygen, and our mind. Take this pilot, for example. His mind is so distracted that he fails to see many things, like what's been happening to that spot on the windshield. Because his eyes did not see, a pilot nearly spoiled his whole day in a mid-air collision, in broad daylight, in Kavu weather. The situation you just saw was not unusual. Surprisingly enough, nearly all mid-airs have occurred in daylight hours in VFR weather. Not so surprising, maybe. The majority occurred within 5 miles of an airport, and usually on warm weekend afternoons when more pilots are doing more flying. Most mid-airs are the result of a faster aircraft overtaking a slower one. Statistics on mid-airs show that most were at overtaking convergence angles. 3/4 of mid-airs occurred at or below 3,000 feet, about 50% below 500 feet. This indicates that many mid-airs occur in the traffic pattern, most particularly on final approach. Who's involved in mid-airs? All pilots. They range in experience from first solo to airline pilots with thousands of hours. There's no way to say whether the inexperienced pilot or the old not-so-bold pilot is the most likely candidate for a mid-air. The beginning pilot has so much to think about that he may forget to look around. Or the older pilot, having sat through many hours of boring flight without spotting hazardous traffic, may grow complacent and forget to scan. No pilot is invulnerable. So, what causes mid-air collisions? Undoubtedly, traffic density is a factor. Higher closing speeds also represent a potential. For instance, a typical light twin and single engine have a closure rate of nearly 300 knots. At 1 mile distance, they are 12 seconds apart. It takes a minimum of 10 seconds for a pilot to spot traffic, identify it, realize it is a collision threat, react, and have his aircraft respond. The problem is compounded when air traffic control and radar facilities lull us into a false sense of security. These are all causal factors. But the reason most often noted in the statistics reads, failure of pilot to see other aircraft. In most cases, at least one of the pilots could have seen the other and avoided contact if he had been using his eyes properly. So it's really that complex little organ, the eye, that is one of the leading causes of mid-air collisions. Let's see how the limitations and susceptibility of the eye affect flight. For example, optical properties of the atmosphere alter the appearance of traffic, and restricted visibility really means limited vision. Lighting also affects our vision. An object that has high contrast is easy to see. For instance, when the sun is behind you, an aircraft is easy to spot. But when you're looking into the sun, it's a different story. Objects are hard to see, and scanning uncomfortable. A constant problem to a pilot, though you are probably never aware of it, is the time required for eye accommodation. Your eyes automatically accommodate or focus on near and far objects. A change from something up close, like a dark panel 2 feet away, to a landmark or other airplane a mile or more away will average 1 to 2 seconds, but it may take longer. And that can be a long time with conflicting traffic. Another problem happens at very high altitudes and even at lower levels above a haze or cloud deck. If there is little or nothing to focus on at infinity, we get empty field myopia. We stare, and the eyes go into idle. Peripheral vision primarily perceives movement or reflection. During daylight, you can't identify the movement or reflection, so now you use your central field of vision to focus on and identify the traffic. Another built-in problem is obstruction to binocular vision. Assume this is from the left eye, while this is from the right eye position. The object seen by the left eye is hidden from the right eye by the windshield post. When both eyes are used together, the perception of the object may be confused by the brain. Beside the built-in problems, the eye is also limited by the environment. One problem area is locating an airplane over a cluttered background. Notice how it blends into the background. Another point, at a distance, an aircraft on a collision course will appear to be motionless with little perceived change in size. You need motion or contrast to attract the eye's attention. An aircraft initially hidden from view by a dirty spot, large bug smear, or crazing of your windshield becomes a serious limiting factor. Bringing charts up to date or doing bookwork that should have been done on the ground is a sure distraction that can be avoided. Any one of these factors can result in a midair. Think how the problem is compounded by a combination of them. The most important thing to vision is the mind. It can distract us to the point of not seeing, or it can lull us into cockpit myopia and even complacency. How often have you settled back at your assigned altitude, accepted traffic advisories, and never looked outside, feeling secure that that unseen person on the ground will watch out and protect you from all harm? Don't you rely on it. Remember, you're the one who is in the air, and radar has its limitations. As you can see, your visual perception is affected by many factors. It all boils down to the fact that most pilots tend to overestimate their visual abilities. So, what's all this got to do with you? Mid-air collisions don't occur every day, but near misses happen with regularity. The potential is ever present for all of your flights. So it's your responsibility to use your eyes to avoid a mid-air collision. The best way to avoid running into another airplane seems to be proper external scan techniques. So you say, "Give me the perfect scan." We have to answer, there is none. Or at least there is no one scan that is best for all pilots. You must develop a scan that's comfortable and workable for you. We can, however, point out poor scan techniques and demonstrate methods proven most effective. By poor scan techniques, we mean several things. Not looking out is the poorest scan technique of all. Looking out only for brief intervals is also poor, when it takes only seconds for a disaster to happen. Glancing out and giving it the old once-around is practically useless. And staring out at one spot for long periods of time may be great for meditation, but as a scan technique, it's also pretty much useless. So let's talk about some good habits, like where should you concentrate your scan? Preferably everywhere. But this not being really practical, concentrate on the areas most critical to you. In general, if you concentrate on an area, plus or minus 60 degrees left and right, and 10 degrees up and down from your flight vector, you can usually spot conflicting targets. This doesn't mean that you can forget your side windows. If you have passengers, be sure to brief them about looking for other aircraft. The 747 at 39,000 feet with a contrail, or the crop duster at 10 feet above the ground, are not usually on conflicting vectors with themselves or you. When conversing with your co-pilot, and both of you are inclined to face each other, the one on the right should be aware of clearing the area on the left, and the one on the left should be aware of clearing the area on the right. On climbs and descents, make gentle S-turns to see if any conflicting traffic is there. In the traffic pattern especially, be sure to clear the approach path, both for someone coming straight in and then between you and the airport. Clear yourself before every turn. During that very critical final approach stage, avoid tunnel vision. Make heading changes to check hidden areas. Pilots often rivet their eyes to the point of touchdown. If another pilot is aiming for the same numbers at the same time, neither one of you may arrive there. The slower your aircraft, the greater your vulnerability. Hence, the greater scan area and precautions required. Just as you drive defensively, fly defensively. It's helpful to know what an opposing aircraft looks like from various distances. For example, traffic at 1 mile appears like this. At a half mile, like this. Quarter mile. 1/8 mile. 100 feet. Just don't forget that your eyes can play some nasty tricks on you. Now, about that perfect scan, let's simulate a scan pattern. This is what we call the block method. Start at the left and move to the right, focusing briefly in the center of each block. Since you don't see when the eye is moving, target detection can only be accomplished through a series of eye fixations at different points. By focusing every 10 degrees or so, you should be able to detect any contrasting or moving object in the scan area. Another form of the block system is the front to side version. Start with a fixation in the center. Move to the left. Swing back to the front and move right. To achieve maximum efficiency in flight, you have to establish a good internal scan technique as well. Here are some recommendations. Start with your attitude indicator. Use the other instruments, more or less, depending on the flight maneuver. Return to the attitude indicator each time. This is your chief control instrument. Developing an efficient scan time-sharing system takes some thought and planning, but it is just as important to you as developing good landing techniques. Go out and develop a scan pattern in your own airplane or the one you usually fly. Then, use it. Spotting other aircraft is not the easiest thing to do, so make use of any hints that you get. For instance, if radar advisory warns you of traffic, your job is easier.
Bonanza 360, you have traffic 2 o'clock, 2 miles, altitude unknown.
Once you have the traffic, we suggest you watch him very carefully. But don't forget the rest of the sky. What do you do if there is conflicting traffic, that is, a target that appears stationary? Keep it in sight and determine its altitude. If you believe that immediate evasive action is necessary, move vertically to avoid the other aircraft. This movement will displace your aircraft faster, allowing a near miss rather than a collision. Collision avoidance involves more than proper eyeball techniques. You can be the most conscientious scanner in the world and still have a mid-air collision because you neglected other important factors in the overall C and B scene system. Let your plane's equipment help you and be sure it's working. High-intensity strobes increase your contrast by as much as 10 times. At night, they will be seen miles away when the nav lights will be totally invisible. During daylight, especially in the pattern, turn the landing lights on. They can be seen even in haze or when the sun is behind you. Good comm radios allow your ears as well as your eyes to come into the action. Listen to the local traffic departing or arriving at an airport. At uncontrolled fields, announce your intentions on the CTAF, Common Traffic Advisory Frequency. Good loudspeakers and newer headsets allow the best understanding of transmissions. Follow recognized phraseology for maximum understanding.
McKinnon traffic, this is Cessna 759er Kilo Tango, departing runway 4, northeast bound from McKinnon.
Transponders allow you to be picked up on radar easier. Mode C altitude encoders enable air traffic controllers to determine your altitude even if they are not talking to you. Also, your altitude is now available to other pilots. TCAS, Traffic Alert Collision Avoidance Systems aboard air carriers, use transponders and Mode C to display intruding potential targets. This display may provide you with the best insurance from the Midair with an air carrier, as it depicts a threat visually and audibly to the air carrier crew. The action to resolve the potential conflict is shown and can be easily performed. Recent Midairs could have been avoided with this equipment, but it requires all aircraft to have transponders with Mode C. Collision avoidance starts with a check of yourself. Your eyesight and consequently your safety depend on your mental and physical condition. Also, plan your flight ahead of time. Have charts folded in proper sequence and available. Be familiar with headings, frequencies, and so forth ahead of time. Be aware in advance of TCAs, ARSAs, restricted, prohibited, and military operating areas, MOAs. Military aircraft can fly so fast they can be almost invisible. During pre-flight walk-around, make sure your windshield is clean. If possible, keep your windshield and windows clear of obstructions like solid sun visors and curtains. In flight, adhere to standard operating procedures such as correct altitudes. Avoid crowded airspace, such as directly over a VOR. Many a mid-air or near miss has taken place at such a spot. Compensate for your aircraft's design limitations. All planes have blind spots. Know where they are in your aircraft. For example, a high wing down in a turn blocks the area you are turning into. A low wing blocks the area beneath it. Use the equipment in your aircraft. Turn your lights on, strobes particularly. Landing lights in the pattern, day and night. Use your radios to let your ears work for both you and your passengers. Have them part of your lookout crew. Most important, look around. Look where you're going. Watch for traffic. Adhere always to good airmanship. Keep yourself and your airplane prepared. And develop and use an effective scan system. Get acquainted with your eyes. Compensate for their limitations and take care of them. Don't forget that as you train your eyes to spot targets at a distance, you'll also learn to use your eyes properly in other ways. If you couple your eyes with your brain, you'll enjoy the benefits of vision and flying for a long time.